Okay, let's go now to the important points we need to know for your muscular system. So this is your muscles. And these are just the most common ones. So the gastrocnemius, the quadriceps femoris, your sartorius, your abdominal muscles, your biceps brachii. So these are the muscles that are very much visible if you are, if you're an athlete, if you are fond of working out. Ayan. Pectoralis major, which is your breastbone. Ayan. Sternocleidomastoid, your neck muscle, sorry. Pectoralis major, your breast muscles. Sabi ko neck, breastbone, sorry. So pectoralis major is your breast muscles, and then your sternocleidomastoid is your neck muscles, your masseter for chewing, your temporalis, and of course your heart is a muscle. Kaya nga siya, the ability of the heart to pump attributes to the heart being a muscle. So your heart is capable of shrinking and enlarging or enlargement. The muscular system is made up of muscle tissue and is responsible for functions such as maintenance of posture, locomotion, and control of various circulatory functions. The muscular system is closely associated with the skeletal system to facilitate movement. So both voluntary and involuntary muscular functions are controlled by your nervous system. So ano ang mga kaibigan again ng muscular system? Of course naman, kaibigan niya ang lahat ng systems because all systems are interconnected, but the very much or the closest ones to the muscular system is your skeletal and your nervous. So there are three types of muscles. We have the skeletal muscle, cardiac, and the smooth muscles. Then muscles are named according to these. So if they are parallel, if they are convergent, pennate, circular. Ayan. So I won't be actually giving weight on these, on how the muscles are named, where the muscles are originated and connected. So later na yan siya. The functions of your muscular system, it's here, and most of it are very self-explanatory. So of course, movement of your body, maintenance of posture. Ano bang posture? Pag ikaw ay nakatayo, ano ba ang itsura mo pag nakatayo ka? Upright ka ba? Slouching ka ba? Ayan. So, muscular system also helps in our respiration, production of body heat, communication, constriction of organs and vessels, and contraction of the heart. Okay, let's continue with the skeletal muscle structure. Ang structure na niya. So, the connective tissue covering the muscle includes your epimysium, perimysium, and endomysium. Let's see. Okay, so it's here. The perimysium, or the first layer, is the epimysium. So, it's here. The epimysium, the outer layer. Perimysium is the inner layer, and the endomysium is the middle layer. Okay? For the muscle fiber structure, we have the sarcolemma, transverse tubules, sarcoplasmic reticulum, sarcoplasm, and your myofibrils, which are protein fibers. We have the actin or the thin myofilaments and the myosin, which are the thick myofilaments. So, nasaan yan? So, ito yun siya. So, nilagyan ko na ng circle para hindi mahirap i-identify. So, your myofibrils are here. Sa myofibril mo, meron siyang basic unit na sarcomere which is capable of contraction. So, yung sarcomere mo, itong area mo, yan na yung nag-constrict, nag-straighten, nag-constrict, nagle-lengthen, ayan. And then, inside that, you have your actin myofilaments and myosin myofilaments. So, ang myosin ay yung makapal na strand, ang actin ay yung thin or yung parang hair-like. Then, you have here the sarcoplasmic reticulum, here, this area. Then, you have here the sarcolemma, here. And then, your transverse tubules, this one. Okay. Okay, the sarcomere is the basic structural and functional unit of a skeletal muscle because it is the smallest portion of a skeletal muscle capable of contracting. So, ito siya. Ito na yun. Sabi ko kanina, capable of contracting yan. Then, actin filaments are made up of three components. We have the actin, troponin, and tropomyosin. So, just read through it. Actin, troponin, and tropomyosin. Then, we have the myosin, thick filaments. It resembles bundles of tiny golf clubs. So, yung myosin filaments mo, meron siyang myosin head. Myosin heads bind to the attachment sites on the actin filaments. They bend and straighten during contraction. They break down ATP and release energy.
Striated muscle is made up of bundles of multinucleated muscle cells called myofibers. A myofiber is packed with myofibrils that extend the length of the cell. A sarcomere, the functional instructional unit of muscle, consists of thick myosin filaments and thin actin filaments. Titin keeps thick filaments centered during contraction. In muscle contraction, actin filaments slide past myosin filaments. Neither filaments change in length, yet the sarcomere becomes shorter. The force required for this movement is generated by myosin heads, which make cross-bridge attachments to actin. Myosin heads walk along an actin filament, using ATP for energy. Tropomyosin is part of the complex that prevents myosin from sliding along the thin filaments. A myosin head binds ATP and as a result detaches from the actin filament. It rebinds in a new position. Phosphate release triggers a power stroke that moves the actin filament. ADP disassociates and the process is repeated.
Okay, so dito na tayo sa excitability of muscle fibers. So ano ma'am, ano ba itong resting membrane potential? When I was a student, ito din yung tanong ko. So parang ilang beses ko muna siya binasa bago ko naintindihan nung student pa ako. Alright, cell membranes have a negative charge on the inside and relative to a positive charge outside. This is called the resting membrane potential. So, look at here. Sodium ions move into cells during depolarization. So, yung sodium mo, pumapasok sa cell pag nagdi-depolarize. Pag repolarization naman, ang potassium, here, your potassium moves out of the cell. So, ganito siya ang nangyayari, ha? Sige, ipapakita ko na lang, explain ko. So, this is your resting membrane potential. If you observe here in resting membrane potential, wait, let me make it bigger. Ayan. In resting membrane potential, walang gate na open. Ma'am, ano ba itong gate? Ito yung cell membrane mo. Anong cell membrane mo? Yan yung cell wall mo. Yung pinapasukan at linalabasan ng kung ano-ano dyan sa cell. Kasi ang cell mo, yan talaga ang basic unit ng body mo. So, ang cell, doon talaga pumapasok dapat yung doon na pre-process yung nutrients mo, yung things na kinain natin, kung sa yung blood mo, doon papunta yan pag nourish ng cells. Okay? So in your cells, meron tayong cell membrane. Ang cell membrane natin cell membranes are permeable. Sometimes we say it's permeable and non-permeable. Depende kung ano yung papasok sa cell at ano yung lalabas. Pag sinabi nating permeable, open siya. Pag sinabing non-permeable, ayan, sarado siya. So, ganon. Sa resting membrane potential, pag napansin nyo, sarado siya. And the cell is naturally permeable to other substances. So that's why there is a gate that is open para sa mga kung ano-ano lang na pwedeng pumasok. Pwedeng potassium, pwedeng sodium, bahala na. But in a specific stimulus or in a specific situation, for resting membrane potential muna tayo ha. Step 1, resting membrane potential. Wala munang open. Except lang ito ha, kasi sa permeability yan eh. Okay, so sarado, sarado, sarado. Sa loob ng cell, negative ang charge. Sa labas ng cell, positive ang charge. So yan, walang nangyayari pa sa resting. Kasi nga resting eh. Resting membrane potential. Pag nag-depolarize na siya, for the depolarization, what is involved here is your sodium. If you notice, let's make that bigger. Okay. If you notice, your sodium channels or your gates are open. So, papasok na yung sodium. Positive charge siya, oh. So, papasok siya sa cell mo. Kaya, naging positive na yung loob ng cell at negative na sa labas. Okay? That is depolarization. Pag repolarization naman, again ha, depolarization, sodium ang pinag-uusapan. Pag repolarization na, potassium na ang pinag-uusapan natin. Let's make that bigger. Okay. So, sarado yung sodium channels mo o yung dalawang gate mo dyan ng sodium. Ang open ay ang dalawang gate mo na ng potassium. So, ang potassium naman ay lalabas na sa cell. Kaya ang mangyayari, kasi positive charge din yung potassium paglabas niya, noong depolarization, di ba negative na sa labas? Nung nag-repolarize, paglabas ng potassium, naging positive din sa labas ng cell at negative na naman sa loob ng cell. Okay? Naintindihan? Medyo confusing lang, pero madali lang siyang ma-internalize kung pipilitin lang natin maintindihan. Okay? Ayan. Bakit nangyayari yan? Kasi nga, muscle fibers are highly specialized, electrically excitable cells. So, like other cells in the body, electrically excitable cells are polarized. Meaning, ang muscle fibers mo, kasi nga, di ba, lahat ng body parts natin merong cell. So, ang muscle ay meron ding cell. So, itong resting membrane potential ay nangyayari doon sa isang muscle cell. Nagkakaroon siya ng exchange of charges ng sodium and potassium para magkaroon ng polarization, meaning electricity. Kasi kailangan natin ng electricity from the polarized minerals or materials or substances in our body para maka-initiate tayo ng muscle contraction. Okay? Kaya nangyayari itong resting membrane potential, depolarization, repolarization. Habang nangyayari yan, nagkakaroon ng palitan ng charges, nagkakaroon tayo ng muscle contraction. Okay? Nerve supply and muscle fiber stimulation. Skeletal muscles do not contract unless they are stimulated. So, kung kanina, electrical charges ang pinag-uusapan natin ng sodium, potassium, nagpapalit-palit sila doon sa loob ng cell para maka-initiate tayo ng muscle contraction. Ito naman ay yung nerve supply. Okay? Or muscle fiber stimulation. We are talking about the brain being involved in a muscle contraction. So, hindi nagko-contract ang isang muscle kung walang stimulus. Motor neurons are specialized nerve cells that stimulate muscles to contract. Kasi ganito yan. Ang brain mo ang mag-uutos. Diba? For example, Ira, pulutin mo yung basura. Brain muna ang mauunang magsabi bago mag-action yung skeletal system mo, muscular system mo, at pulutin ng katawan mo yung basura. Motor neurons generate action potentials that travel to skeletal muscle fibers. So, itong action potential are electrical signals that actually travel to your muscle fibers. So, sabi ng utak mo, may kailangan kang basurang pulutin. So, ang motor neurons from your brain, nag-generate siya ng signal para sabihan niya yung muscle fibers mo. Action potential is an electric signal. Motor neurons generate action potentials that travel to skeletal muscle fibers, and then your axons of these neurons enter muscles and send out branches to several muscle fibers. Each branch forms a junction with a muscle fiber called your neuromuscular junction. So later papakita ko kung nasaan yan. The function of the action potential in the motor neuron is to stimulate the release of acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter substance released from motor neurons that innervate skeletal muscle fibers. So, ito yung axon. Di ba ang axon? Sabi ang axon, dyan dumadaan yung electrical signal. Dito dumadaan yung electrical signal at dito nangyayari yung palitan nila. Kumbaga, yung mga pag-uusap nila na, uy, kailangan ka nang mag-contract, kailangan kang mag-relax. Nangyayari yan sa neuromuscular junction. Okay? So, ito na yung muscle fiber mo. Okay, so from the brain, sabi ng brain, hey, mag-contract ka, mag-bend ka. Yan, sa axon muna siya dadating. Doon sila mag-uusap sa neuromuscular junction, tsaka na siya mag-root down sa muscle fiber mo at gagawin na ng muscle fiber mo kung ano ang gustong gawin ng brain mo. Okay? Ayan. Ayan o. So, this is the microscopic view. So, this is your axon. And then, your neuromuscular junction. And this is your skeletal muscle fiber. So, yan. Pwede siyang lengthen, shorten, lengthen, shorten. Depende kung anong sabi ng brain mo. What is summation? When a stimulus frequency is low, muscle fibers completely relax between muscle twitches. Okay, so ang isang muscle twitch ay isang contraction and relaxation. Okay. Ang summation, for example here, kung ang stimulus frequency, ano ibig sabihin ng stimulus frequency? Kung ang pangangailangan mo ng isang movement ay hindi naman muscle contraction process. Contraction of skeletal muscle tissue occurs as actin and myosin filaments slide past one another causing sarcomeres to shorten. So ito nga ay tinatawag nating sliding filament model.
Sliding filament theory is the mechanism by which muscles are thought to contract at a cellular level. An understanding of the structure of skeletal muscle is useful when learning how sliding filament theory works. Each muscle is made up of a number of bundles of muscle fibers. Each bundle of muscle fibers contains anywhere from 10 and 100 individual fibers. Each muscle fiber itself contains cylindrical organelles known as myofibrils, which themselves are bundles of proteins called actin and myosin. Surrounding the myofibril, there is a network of tubules and channels called the sarcoplasmic reticulum, where calcium is stored. Each myofibril can be broken down into functional repeating segments called sarcomeres. If we look at a two-dimensional model of a sarcomere, it consists of actin and myosin. When a nerve impulse arrives at the muscle, it causes a release of a chemical called acetylcholine. The presence of acetylcholine causes depolarization, enabling calcium to be released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The calcium binds to troponin, changing its shape and so moving tropomyosin from the active site of the actin. The myosin filaments can now attach to the actin, forming a cross bridge. The breakdown of ATP releases energy, which enables the myosin to pull the actin filaments inwards, contracting the muscle. This occurs along the entire length of every myofibril in the muscle cell. When an ATP molecule binds to the myosin head, the myosin detaches from the actin and the cross bridge is broken. When the ATP is then broken down, the myosin head can again attach to an actin binding site further along the actin filament and repeat the process. This repeated pulling of the actin over the myosin is often known as the ratchet mechanism. This process of muscular contraction can last for as long as there are adequate ATP and Ca+ stores. Once the nerve impulse stops, the Ca+ is pumped back to the sarcoplasmic reticulum and the actin returns to its resting position, causing the muscle to lengthen and relax.
Energy for a muscle contraction is supplied to the muscles in the form of adenosine triphosphate, a high-energy molecule produced from the energy that is released during the metabolism of food. ATP is equals energy, so that is taken from what we eat every day. Yan, what is a muscle twitch? Ang muscle twitch ay, una muna, action potential. Anong muscle twitch? It's like a single movement of your muscle. Okay. So, sorry, I had a message. Okay, so for muscle twitch, una muna is action potential. Ano nga ulit ang action potential? Ang action potential ay isang signal. Oo, na nagsasabing, hey, kailangan kang mag-contract. Okay, so the time between the stimulus and the initiation of contraction is termed as the latent period, which is followed by the contraction period. So from the action potential, which is your stimulus, then the contraction happens. After that, there is a relaxation. Siyempre, nag-contract na siya. After that, release. Yun lang ang muscle twitch. Ganun lang siya. Mabilis. Nagkakaroon ng relaxation between muscle twitches. However, as a stimulus frequency increases, one contraction summates or is added onto previous contraction, increasing the overall force of contraction. Okay, what is tetanus? Tetanus is a sustained contraction that occurs when the frequency of stimulation is so rapid that no relaxation occurs. Recruitment naman. Okay, explain ko mamaya ang tetanus. Recruitment. More motor units are stimulated yan which increases the total number of muscle fibers contracting. Thus, our muscle contract with more force. So, ang recruitment at ang summation ay more or less parang magkapatid. Ang recruitment ay, ang pinag-uusapan dito, ang motor units. So, pag maraming motor units ang nai-stimulate, muscle contraction mo ay mas lumalakas. Katulad ng summation, pag marami kang muscle contraction, ang overall force ng contraction mo ay malakas din. Okay, maximum force of contraction is produced in a given muscle when all the motor units of that muscle are stimulated. Sa tetanus naman, says it is a sustained contraction that occurs when the frequency of stimulation is so rapid that no relaxation occurs. Parang naglalak ka. Naintindihan nyo? Yung parang nagko-contract na lang siya. Baga na-confuse siya sa dami ng stimulation. So, sa dami ng stimulation niya, hindi na siya nakapag-relax. Nag-contract na lang siya, hindi na siya bumalik. Energy requirements for muscle contraction. Here, muscle fibers are very energy-demanding cells, whether at rest or during any form of exercise. This energy comes from either aerobic or anaerobic exercise and ATP production. Oxygen is the final electron acceptor at the end of the electron transport chain of aerobic respiration. In the absence of oxygen, only a few ATP are produced from glucose. In the presence of oxygen, many more ATP are made. That is why I was explaining a few months ago to you that oxygen is very important in energy production. Kasi nga, ginagamit ng ATP yan, yung oxygen mo. So, pag hindi ka nakakahinga ng maayos, pag ikaw ay na-COVID, wala kang energy. Kasi walang oxygen or konting oxygen lang ang pumapasok sa katawan mo. Okay? There. So, these are the things we need to know for aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Just read through this. And here, fatigue. Okay, so what is fatigue? Fatigue is a temporary state of reduced work capacity. Without fatigue, muscle fibers would be worked out to the point of structural damage to them and their supportive tissues. Yan, ang fatigue ay parang alarm. Okay, it is like an alarm in our body or on your skeletal muscle that says, sobra-sobra na ang stimulation, sobra-sobra na ang muscle contraction, hindi na kaya, baka masira na. So, ikaw ay mag-i-stop na. So, yan ay fatigue. Pero hindi ibig sabihin na hindi na kaya. Kaya pa. It's just that, kung ipilit pa yung maraming muscle contraction, pwede na siyang makakos ng damage. So, automatic yung katawan mo, nag-i-inform siya na, hey, stop na tayo kasi nagfa-fatigue na. Okay? T lymphocytes A type of white blood cell migrate into heavily worked muscles. The presence of immune system intermediates, increases the perception of pain. So, ang katawan mo ay pag nararamdaman mong masakit na, yung movement, exercise, tapos masakit na, napaprompt yung brain mo na, ay, masakit na, kailangan ko nang tumigil. Okay? Kasi baka ma-damage na siya. Right? Here, an example of muscle fatigue occurs when a runner collapses on the track and must be helped off. The runner's muscle can no longer function regardless of how determined the runner is. So, minsan, brain mo na lang ang malakas, katawan mo hindi na kaya, ano? So, pahinga din. Under conditions of extreme muscular fatigue, muscle may become incapable of either contracting or relaxing. There, so those are the things we need to cover for muscular system.